Hi, Ilia.
Hi.
Hi. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. And more than anything, I'm excited to consider your hopes and dreams for AI and just hear your fresh perspective that is unique to you and in the work that you do. And if it's helpful and you want to share a little bit about the reasons that you have your perspective and the work that you're engaged with, please do. But more than anything, I want to open with the question, which is what are your hopes and dreams for AI?
Well, my hopes are that we are able to understand how to use it. Because I think the thing that happens around this year and throughout this year is that with the new shiny toy of the language models being so prominent, everyone can't stop talking about it and everyone can't stop being excited about it, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
But I think as I have been honing down the thought process on this, humans tend to overattribute things to entities that speak like humans. So when we hear back our own voices through the language model that we're talking with, it speaks our language. So therefore, we feel like it must possess some other attributes of a human intelligence that it possibly cannot possess. So I think decoupling that, having a clear enough understanding of the processes of what it is, so that we can use it adequately. There are uses for it, absolutely, and I think we hope to find and we dream to find essentially. That's the hope basically is finding the appropriate uses for the appropriate tools, rather than trying to smear everything as being solved or just about solved by AI. So I think that's what I would go with to begin with.
And so, what would it look like if we really understood the appropriate use and it was integrated into our life in this kind of dreamy, ideal way? What would be some of the ways that you'd like to see it integrate?
Well, I think human life has a lot of rich context, and I think the issues we have with using AI properly right now is trying to communicate that context in an efficient manner so that it understands and actually responds to our query. If I ask it for write me a good, I don't know, cover letter or a good lesson plan, it
Mm,
doesn't know what I mean. It will give me something, but it's not the context that I exist in. So
mm.
being able to optimize the way we actually provide that context for the machines, and then machines are able to act on that context more readily. I think that would be brilliant. So being able, and I think this is coming, this will come soon enough. Being able to have your phone assistant to, you can ask, when was the last time I emailed that guy, or what did that guy said when I
Mhm,
emailed him, and it
mhm,
will be able to actually understand the context enough and respond that way. Likewise, if we're talking about educational environments, last time I had that lesson plan, or last time I was teaching this context, this concept rather, the responses were thus, and therefore, can you suggest some improvements or possibly reiterate my previous thoughts on this matter? So I think using the machines to navigate and actually combine and collate our context together and then operate within them, that's the biggest challenge right now. Because they're not, at the moment, we can't constrain them well enough to the thing we want them to do. They sway, they go sideways, they hallucinate, they make stuff up. So I
mm.
think restricting it, but also allowing it to operate within the specific context. That would be the best case scenario.
I love that they make stuff up. What's the fear behind a system that is able to do that?
The fear behind a system that is able to do that is the fact that humans don't fully accept that it is able to do that. I think I've seen a conversation recently or a paper where there are hints in our current language models. People would say that there are hints that they're able to reason because look, it's able to answer this reasoning question with what looks like reasoning. So therefore, it must possess a degree of reasoning. Yes, sometimes it's wrong, but so are humans. Who isn't wrong when they're reasoning? But through the types of mistakes that the language model makes, if it were able to reason, it would never reason this way. So therefore, it's actually internalizing as people using these machines or these tools that when it looks like it's right, it doesn't give you any glimpses into the fact that it's just right, but it's wrong sometimes. What it in fact states for us is that it doesn't have the ability to know what's right.
Mm.
It just randomly selects one behavior over the other behavior. So coming back to your question, what's wrong with it making stuff up? There's nothing wrong with it making stuff up. It will do because that's the limitation of the system. What's wrong with it is that we sort of wave it off and say, ah, no, no, sometimes it makes stuff up. Now, the problem is that it's sometimes right by chance and sometimes it's wrong by chance. And we have no way of influencing that chance at the moment because if I were to ask you to define how would you define a fact? What is a fact?
Mm.
Like, can you give me some facts? And you would rattle through some facts, but we don't know necessarily what we mean by that. We sort of assume that the other person knows what I mean by a fact. For me, a fact is that the earth is flat, the moon is made out of cheese, and there is no gravity. It's just made up. So that's a fact for me. What's a fact for you?
Well, and excuse me, the discernment that we all need to develop in order to be able to know like what is what and what is a fact and what is a good sentence. Like just because the generative AI robot, whatever we're using, is giving us X sentence doesn't mean it's a good sentence. And to be able to take our own flair and add to it, I think is what we all need to be learning in the next few years. And
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
on that, I used the word robot just then, and you had used two words. One was tool and one was machine. And I'm curious about your your understanding or experience with these types of, I'm just going to call them things for now. What is the best way to look at them? What is the best lens to carry as we step into the AI era of all of these? Again, I'm going to use the word things. What is the best lens to have? Tool, machine, robot,
So
friend?
the way I come out of that conundrum is by calling them what they are in terms of the technology that they are. So the current generation of language models, and we spend most of the time talking about language models, the chat GPTs and whatnot. They are a language model, they're neural networks. They are basically spreadsheets of numbers. So if I'm being cynical, if I'm being really, really simplistic, I would refer to them as a spreadsheet of numbers. And then suddenly all of the excitement about it dies down because, oh, today I asked my spreadsheet, what should I write as a cover letter as I'm looking for a job? And it gave me this answer. Well, suddenly you don't think a spreadsheet is clever. You don't think a spreadsheet understands you or knows what you're talking about, has any emotions, has any intelligence, has any capabilities to, you know what I mean, because it is literally a spreadsheet. It is a gigantic set of numbers. GPT-3, the previous precursor to ChatGPT, had 175 billion numbers in that spreadsheet. It's a massive spreadsheet that's a hassle to run, a hassle to store, and it only spins up when you talk to it. Humans don't spin up when you talk to them. They're alive all the time. We process things all the time. So we are agents, we're living entities, we're interactive all the time. Whereas they are I mean, I would distinguish between a robot and a machine and a spreadsheet essentially by the fact that the robot is on and it's processing information, it's responding and it's doing things. It has some presence, some ongoing, continuing existence. And that will be a primitive existence, but nonetheless, it exists. A spreadsheet, it's there, you open it, you put numbers in, you press calculate, it spits numbers out, you close it again, you don't speak to it, it doesn't exist outside of that one interaction.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I wonder about, I guess I something that you said that I really loved was that like each each one deserves its own lens and they will serve different purposes. And so we actually need to be very adaptive in this next decade or so to understand their intention and purpose and come at it from that
Hmm.
standpoint. Because like even between different word processors, I find I need to have a different lens of the actual tool in order to get the most out of it. So if I'm using Coda versus Notion versus Microsoft Word or Google Docs, they can do such different things, though at their heart, they're a blank piece of paper,
Hmm. Yeah,
and yet,
absolutely.
sorry?
Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So going into a little bit of your fears or your um curiosities, even maybe it's not fear, but it's just what you're wondering or curious about. What are you what are you thinking about the next decade or so and what we're entering into?
So I think on one side of the spectrum, in a very cynical way, nothing will change for the next 5 years. So all of this hype will die down; it will go away. Like I joke is that by the end, so th- by the end of this year, you will probably see some version of chatbot built into Microsoft Excel. And when you have something built into Microsoft Excel, it stops being excited immediately. Like at the second it's part of Excel, it's dead. No one cares about it. No one talks about it. And I anticipate this will happen by the end of the year. Microsoft will shove the chatbot into Microsoft Excel, where it will actually, I'll have to give it credit, work really well. because for very specifically well-designed, well-defined rather problems of, I want a formula that looks at this row of numbers or column of numbers and spits out that specific value about those numbers, that's a really strictly defined problem with a very strictly defined answer in terms of the Microsoft function language thing. So that's fine. But as soon as that becomes a reality, people will go, "Ah, it's in Excel, is it? I'm not particularly fussed about that anymore." That's the cynical view. I do expect a degree of money go into specific research, and that research to yield something that is actually genuinely useful. I don't think the current language models that we have will become useful unless something significant happens to the way we use them. They're really expensive to run. They're really bulky in terms of actually storing and using them. They're not. Yes, ChatGPT is free for everyone to use, but if you want to use it in a specific way, it's not democratic. You can't easily sort of set one up. You have to have a degree of specialist knowledge, and then whatever, whatever, whatever. So I think is the specific things we have right now that everyone is so excited about and billions of dollars of investment are flying around, that I would expect to die down. But what might come out of it is more research and perhaps better tools. What I'm personally excited by, though, is with my sometimes quite cynical view of what the current technology actually is, and I don't believe it can do the things that lots of people say it can do. But then we do get some research based on that, where the limited capabilities that are hidden inside are being put to good use. So, for example, agent-based interactions. So, for example, you might have heard there's a game called Minecraft where a player interacts with a simulation of a world where there is quite a significant number of possible interactions you can have. You can punch a tree, piece of wood falls out, you can take that wood, you chop it up into blocks, and then you can set fire to them or whatever, whatever. A lot of those interactions are based on human language, as in tree makes into planks, planks become sticks, sticks make tools. Those are not excited. They're not sort of deep knowledge about the world. They're not specific formulae that you can get wrong. They're just common sense nursery understanding of the world. If I have a stick, I attach another stick to it, it's now a pickaxe. So a language model possesses that knowledge. It's not knowledge, but it knows of that relation. So the interesting research I've seen, for example, is a group of researchers, they put the agent, the language model, as the agent acting in the Minecraft world, where it will have a description of what is happening, and then it might respond in a simple text form of, I'm hungry, therefore I should eat something. The options in Minecraft, the game, for me to eat are bread. How do you make bread? Language model. Oh, you make bread by planting some seeds. Brilliant. Minecraft has a thing called seeds. How do you get those seeds? Minecraft has an option to punch a piece of grass and it gives you seeds. So therefore, the language model with its limited capabilities has no intelligence, has no ability to actually process information, but it speaks a language, and that language can now drive the interaction of a player with the virtual world. And I find that's quite fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. That is fascinating. And the whole time you were talking without, obviously I was listening, but I was like imagining like what is comparable to this? What are we in that I can see the potential future iteration of? Obviously it's different, but I was thinking about Palm Pilots and like the early like Blackberries and Palm
Hmm.
Pilot kind of stage of the
Yeah.
smartphone, and just how, now looking back, how innocent and naive we were to think how great they were. Like the Palm Pilot, especially. BlackBerry was definitely a step above that, but the Palm Pilot pretty much did nothing, but it did a heck of a lot more than what we had had before that. And so it's interesting to see this next decade of like what will be the iPhone and the Android and the state of the art iPhone, or sorry, smartphone today
Hmm.
in AI and in generative, specifically language model AI. So yeah. Before we finish, is there anything else that would be um, something you'd want to share, or just like something on this topic? We're going to see what the conference, and you're going to be sharing your perspective then, and putting, helping us through different experiences. But just, yeah, what's here for you right now?
So I think There are two aspects that I'm particularly interested by. And it's mostly the human response to these tools. It's like I mentioned before, it's the fact that we see human likeness in things that are even remotely similar to humans in the language that it speaks. I think two aspects that I would like people to sort of think about, and I think they are the exciting parts, is if we do ever get artificial intelligence, and the debate is out whether we will get something that we would qualify as intelligence, but if we do get it through the machines and the tools that we're currently developing, the interesting thing about it is that for the first time ever, we'll have an intelligence with us that has absolutely nothing in common with any other life on Earth that we're used to. We have much more in common with a dog, and we can understand and empathize with the dog's feelings and thoughts much more than we can with, let's say, if a language model suddenly becomes even remotely intelligent. Because our shared experience and our shared biology with a dog allows us to empathize. We know what pain is, it knows what pain is, it can recognize when we're in pain, we can recognize when the dog is in pain. With a language model, it has none of the shared biology, billions of years worth of biology that we share with the dog. We don't share any of it with the language models. It will have no sense of the world like we do. It has none of the shared actual physiological structure and thinking processes. So if we do ever get something intelligent, even if it might speak like us and respond to us like we would expect a human to, we can't assume that it will be in any way at all comparable to human intelligence or even an animal intelligence or an insect intelligence. We have much more in common with cockroaches than we do with this language model. So the limitations we have speaking to octopuses, well, multiply that by a factor of 1,000, and suddenly you realize how interesting that challenge will be. That we're holding this thing, it's apparently intelligent, but we can't tell, and that's really cool. I think that's really really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the second aspect that we'll spend a little bit more time in the session is, okay, imagine we have this tool, this system that does the things that people keep saying it does. We'll grant you that. We'll grant you that, and we will put that tool in your hands. So you have this magical tools that understands what you mean, whatever, whatever, whatever. You have the rules. You can define the rules of that tool, and you can assume that the tool is magical enough to respond to those needs that you want it to do, and people say they can do already. How would you actually use it? What would be the scenarios in which this tool can be useful? And how would you expect this tool to behave given the rules that you think it possesses? So that's what we'll explore in the session, which should be quite fun. And hopefully, without giving too much away, we'll recognize that even if it were magical enough, things are not as straightforward as they seem to be.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time today, Ilia.
No worries.
See you there.